Hi everyone. Thanks again for joining us for another webinar. We appreciate everybody giving up their time, and hopefully we can give you some good information about SharePoint and OneDrive administration and how MetaVis might be able to help you in that area. Just an overview of the presenters today. So it's going to be Chris Kolodziejski, who's our product manager at MetaVis, and he will be kind of reviewing exactly what MetaVis can do today and what might be coming down the road as far as administration tools for SharePoint on-premise, online, as well as OneDrive administration, which has been very popular in the past few months for MetaVis and some of our clients. So just a little bit about MetaVis before we get started. So we are we're a gold partner. We have offices in a few different locations, but we sell worldwide, we are really focused in on information management tools. So anything around information, which includes migration, administration, tagging, classification, backup, re-architecting that information, whether it resides in SharePoint, Office 365, OneDrive, Google, Box, and other file sync and shared areas. We really try to allow companies to manage their information. The platform itself is a single install, and it's controlled by licensing. And a lot of people start with one of the entry points, which is either migration or backup, and begin to start, once they have the information in their new particular area, are very interested in the administration and security administration area, which Chris is going to touch on today. Some things that make MetaVis unique versus some of the other companies that may be out there is there's a zero install on any source or target server. You can just install this on a laptop or a virtual server, or you can run it on your Azure or Amazon cloud and just remote into it. So it's really nice. It's very easy to kind of get in. You don't have to worry about what version of SharePoint it is and which patch level, and have to manage all the agents that are out there. And it's just very rapid installation and time to value, which is great. It's an enterprise grade tool. We have very large customers with many terabytes of data. We have customers as small is a small business with 150 employees and such. So we try to have a product suite for all the different types of customers and try to give them the best value they can, and be able to grow with them as they progress with their information management. Some of the other things that are relevant is how we kind of go and design and market our products. We make them very easy to install. It's rapid iteration. We try to release our software every week, so this way you're always up to date with the latest cloud tools and cloud information, because Microsoft and Google and all these guys are really rapidly developing their products, and we try to keep pace with them by keeping alongside and talking with them and making sure that we have the tools and fill the gaps that they're leaving open for us. So with that, I'm going to kind of pass off to Chris so he can kind of get into the demo. And if there's any questions, please feel free to enter them into the questions window on the GoToMeeting, and we can go from there.
All right, thanks, Peter.
All right.
Let me switch it back here, and we'll get started. So also, I'd like to thank everybody for their time this morning or this afternoon. So as Peter said, what we're going to talk about here is some of the administration products and offerings that MetaVis has to help ease your daily jobs and allow you to do things relatively easy with regards to SharePoint, SharePoint on-premise, SharePoint online, OneDrive for business. One of the many nice things about the MetaVis platform is that we do support all versions of SharePoint, whether it be on-premise, whether it be SPO, or whether it be OneDrive for business, all within inside of the same console. So if you are in a hybrid situation, or if you are slowly transitioning to the cloud, or you're starting to introduce OneDrive for business to your end users, this tool will have you covered regardless of where you currently are today and where you will end up in the future. So really quick introduction here. I saw quite a few names that I recognized in the attendees list, so I apologize if some of this is regurgitated from previous conversations, but let's just do a quick introduction to the platform, 30, 60 seconds, just to get everybody up to date on some of the high-level architecture. As Peter mentioned, this is a client-side tool, so it is running on my laptop. It would run on some host machine that you want to use. It could be a physical machine, a virtual machine, cloud instance if you want to keep it in the cloud. But it will run and operate from that host machine and only from that host machine. All of the functionality within the platform and all of the functionality that we'll discuss today is done without having to deploy any agents or controls anywhere to your on-premise server and obviously to the cloud. So everything we do is done remotely. Okay, so it gives you a nice benefit where if you don't have to or you don't want to go to your server admins or go through the paperwork and the loops and jump through the hoops where you have to get certain approval to deploy agents or things like that to your server, this does offer that nice zero server footprint architecture. All of it's also security trim, so if you're going to be using it, most likely the folks on the call are administrative roles, but if you want to pass it out to some people who are not administrators, site owners, site collection admins, department heads, folks like that, they will be able to use it with their areas of SharePoint or OneDrive as long as they have access to it. So we do fully respect and use the current security model that's in place inside of your infrastructure. So it doesn't have to be used by an admin if the person is not or does not have that type of role. Okay, so a couple of things we're going to talk about today in the next 40 or so minutes. And again, if there's any questions, please type them into the chat window there, and we'll leave some time at the end to address those. So a couple of things we're going to talk about here is some common scenarios that we talk to our customers about and people we talk to on a daily basis when it comes to administering their SharePoint or their OneDrive for Business. Most common scenarios that we talk to people about is security. People who come to us with security environments in SharePoint or OneDrive that are currently a little bit messy. Things weren't done properly, lack of education from other people in the roles, or there was no proper governance in place, but things got a little messy and they want to come through and clean it up, start heading in the right direction. And others come to us before they start using it because they want to make sure they start off in the right direction. So a lot of times when we talk about administration or governance, it's dealing with security, finding out where people have access, where you have unique permissions, where can you go through and clean up, add people to groups as opposed to giving them direct access, finding orphan users, typical things like that. And we'll go through a couple of scenarios in that in just a moment. And then also content. When it comes to content, there's all kinds of concerns, one being backup of content. With on-premise, it's kind of obvious why you would need to do backups. With online, a lot of people rely on Microsoft or don't want to rely on Microsoft to be their only backup and restore solution. So dealing with the content to be able to store it inside of your own infrastructure, even though you're working with SPO or OneDrive for Business, is definitely a valuable resource. So when it comes to content, we'll talk briefly about backing it up, restoring it, handling employee turnover, a couple of use cases there that people come to us about. And also monitoring, finding out what people are doing, what types of files are being stored, what sites are being used and not used, whether that's for backup reasons or just for understanding of where people visit, where people go, what they're working with, what they're sharing with. External sharing is a big conversation we have quite often with people who are in Office 365 because Microsoft made it very easy to enable external sharing and to obviously then share externally. So that opens up a lot of security concerns about, are people doing it, and if so, where are they doing it and with whom? So it comes back a little bit to the security side, but it definitely works with the data composition, content analysis. If there's folks on the call in regulatory spaces, healthcare, retail space, you might have concerns about people storing confidential information, PII, PHI information. So although it wasn't typically the role of administrators in the past, as it becomes easier and easier for people to store things in the cloud when we talk about 365 or OneDrive for Business, it certainly starts to shift over into the administrator role where you may have to be or you may be responsible for making sure that that type of data isn't stored there, or if it is stored there, it's stored appropriately and it's secured. So we'll talk about a couple of those different points today and give you a couple of quick use cases. So with that said, let's get right into it now. Spend the next 30 or 40 minutes running through a couple of those scenarios. So starting off here with inside of the console, we're going to start here in the Security Manager tool. A couple of high-level important points about the MetaVis Security Manager tool. First one, and this is kind of unique from us versus some of the other products that are on the market, is all of our reports are done in real time. So here with the mindset in Medves is that we don't want to be using cache data. We don't want to be using data that was gathered last night or last week or anything like that. So all of the reports that you generate through the tool are done in real time. So that'll make sure that whatever report is displayed, that is generated for you, is the most up-to-date that it could possibly be. Okay. Second point is that all of these reports that I'll show you in a moment can also be exported. So if you're running it at the request of a colleague or a department head who needs this information, you can certainly generate it through MetaVis, export it out, and then you can email them the results. They can view it through Excel, so they don't have to have the tool installed. And the third thing is actions. So beyond just doing simple reporting, all of the reports are also actionable. So if you do discover something where things are starting to go off the rails a little bit or things that have become a little messy, you can certainly take any number of actions right through MetaVis that will allow you to clean it up. Add permissions, revoke permissions, modify permissions, work with group membership, a whole bunch of actions that allow you to maintain and administer, of course, your security. SharePoint on-premise, online, or OneDrive for Business. Okay, so with those points in mind, let's run through a couple of scenarios here. One of the most telling reports, I'll say, that the tool generates, and probably the most visually appealing or eye-opening, if you want to use that term, is the inheritance. So inheritance, as people on the call probably understand, in SharePoint, once you start going through and breaking inheritance, making lists uniquely permissioned, making items uniquely permissioned, if you go down to that level, things can quickly spiral out of control. So the more unique items you have, the more difficult it becomes to administer. So one of the things that we have in here for discovery purposes is the inheritance report. And it's very simple. It just goes out and it just shows you where all of your inheritance is broken, or whether it's established. So it goes out again in real time, so it's going to crawl through whatever location you specify. These reports can be run against sites, site collections, multiple collections, web applications if you're on premise. But it'll go through, it'll start at that location, it'll crawl through all of your different objects, and it'll show you very cleanly where you have broken inheritance. So it's a good starting point to see if you're unsure about where your permission is or is not inherited. This gives you a good starting point, and you can go through and you can see it. If you want to take actions to clean it up, this is somewhat messy. I have unique permissions on sites, on lists, subsites, items, a lot of different things here, which of course becomes cumbersome to manage. So if you want to just broadly go through and reestablish them, you can. Potentially you want to break them, you can. So it gives you the ability to do bulk cleanup if that's what you're looking to achieve. Okay, if you just want to export this out so you can send it to that site owner and ask them for feedback, you can certainly share these reports as well. But if you want to go a little bit further and do some more discovery and you want to see what's unique, who has access to these, why is it unique? Maybe this unique calendar event here has the same permissions as the calendar itself, so maybe it's unique for no good reason at all. So you have a number of ways to drill into these further and find some more information. So I can select any object within the report. I can say show permissions. It goes out, again, retrieves them in real time. It'll show you everybody who has access to that single object I selected, whether it be groups. I can see who's inside of those groups. If it has unique permissions, this is 365, so I have some internal. I also have some external users. So I can see who's it shared with externally. And I have the ability to come through here and see also the level of access that the users have to the object. Peter? Okay. So you have this ability to go in here and to drill into some detail. see what it is. You also have actions here to grant permissions if you want to give someone really quick access to this object. You can modify permissions if you want to change them. Very simple to do. All this is done available and is available in real time as well. Okay. You also have a nice way to do comparative analysis. So this will actually show you what's unique. So what this report's designed to do is to show you the permissions that are current on this object versus the permissions that are on its parent. So it'll allow you to see what the differences are, if there are any differences, of course. If there aren't differences, then maybe you don't want to have unique permissions. You can just reestablish them. Very simple to do as well. But it gives you a nice comparative, real-time comparative report, allowing you to see those differences. Okay, so this is definitely a great starting point if you're unsure about. Let me just mute Peter here. I think his mic's open. Oh, sorry. Okay, there we go. Thanks. So this will give you a good starting point for doing some comparative analysis and allowing you to see if you're starting to head off the tracks there with some of your inheritance and making more work for yourself. Also, you have just simple object permissions. This is great to see if you have security sprawl. So meaning, do you want to have people in groups and just maintaining membership of groups as well as permissions associated to groups, or do you want to go through and give people direct access, or maybe both? This will give you an idea about who has access to the object, how they have access, whether they're in a group or given direct permissions, the level of access they have. You can see the membership of any of these groups. This is a SharePoint group, so I can see who's inside of it. If you have domain groups, whether they be on-premise or whether you're federating them to Office 365, you'll also be able to see the membership of those groups. Nested groups is also supported, of course. You can have domain groups inside of SharePoint groups. So it does give you a lot of analysis here to go through and really dig in deep to see who exactly has access, whether they be inside of a group or not. So you can start to understand your security model. There's some cleanup that's available as well if I have people who have direct permissions, design control, for example, but I already have a group that has design control. Maybe it's better to put that person in the group as opposed to having a bunch of direct permissions. So I can just simply select any number of users, one or more, and I can just drop them into the appropriate group, and that'll make sure that they get added there as membership, and then you can start to do some cleanup with inside of your security model. So a lot of discovery, a lot of insight here, and of course ability to come through very quickly, very easily, and take some actions to get yourself heading in the right direction when it comes to SharePoint security, which it itself is sometimes a tricky beast to tackle. Okay, so that you have there available, again, all real-time actions, real-time reports. Another thing that we found quite useful for some of our other users is the inventory report. This allows you to take an inventory of all of your security that's associated to the given location, whether it be this site collection, or less. And it allows you to quickly and easily go through, export all of the information, site level permissions, list level permissions, item permissions, whether it's inherited or not, and also group membership. And it exports it out to a nice simple file. You can view it through Excel, and it highlights all of the permissions for that given location at the given time. This is great for auditing purposes or for archival reasons. You just need to have what did my permissions look like. If you want to keep that on record or in-house, this gives you a nice way to do it. These reports are also schedulable and scriptable. So as part of your tool set, if you're comfortable with PowerShell or command line, batch files, things like that, you can certainly generate these type of reports or run these type of actions in a scripting manner so that you can add this additional functionality to your tool set. Okay, and then of course scheduling will allow you to do it on a regular basis. So if you need to give this information to auditors once a week or once a month, or you want to send a report to the department heads every Friday and letting them know what does their security currently look like, it's a good way to start that conversation with folks. Okay, so a number of reports here. This is just a few options that we talked about here, but it's really designed to get you heading in the right direction. Find out if you're heading in the wrong direction, and of course take corrective actions if you are, to make your management of this security a little bit easier. Okay. While we're here in security, another conversation we typically have with people is employee turnover. What do I do when a person leaves a company? If you folks are also Exchange admins, then you probably already have a policy in place where you do some forwarding on their mailbox, archive their mailbox, back up their mailbox. Typical stuff you would do when any employee leaves an organization. But the same thing applies for SharePoint and, of course, now OneDrive for Business as it becomes more and more popular. What do you do with all of that? In this case, permissions. What do I do with the security? If that person is leaving and not being replaced, that's fine. They'll most likely become an orphan user, so we can help you find that and clean that up. If the person's leaving and being replaced, then you're most likely going to want to give the same access to the person who comes in to replace them. If you're managing it through AD, of course, you have that capability built into Active Directory. You can work with the membership there. But if you're not using AD, if you're in 365 and just using cloud accounts, or you're a small organization who's just managing it all through SharePoint groups, it certainly becomes a little problematic to go through and find everywhere where that person has access, and of course give the new person the same level of access. So there's a number of functions built here specifically with security in mind that'll allow you to transfer or clone permissions from user A over to new user B. And this will allow you to do it very quickly, very cleanly, also scripted and schedulable if you want to automate this process. But it'll allow you to do just that. Take the permissions from user A and transfer them to user B. So that user B will have the same access to the same objects and the same locations that the original user had. So it's great for that type of situation where either employee leaves and is being replaced, or if you're expanding your group, as you hire more people to work within that team, you probably want to give them the same level of access that the rest of their team members have. So it's a good way to clone permissions from one user to many as well. And that'll go against all your levels of permissions, site list and items, and you can also, if you choose to, remove that as well. So if the employee was terminated, for example, you might want to also remove their permissions as you transfer them over to another user. Okay, so you have that type of situation, which is quite common for any organization with turnover. Also with turnover, of course, as we just mentioned a moment ago, as people use their OneDrives for business and Office 365 more and more, and when that person decides to leave the company, what do you do with their OneDrive? What do you do with all the content that's stored in there? So it becomes a consideration to have now when it comes to dealing with all of that personal data. It could be personal data, it could be company data that's sitting inside of their OneDrive for Business. So what do I do? Once you delete their account or disable their account, Microsoft will come through about 14 days later, give or take, and they'll permanently delete it. So it'll be gone forever, which may be fine. But if it's company data, you might want to keep it in-house. You might want to keep it on record for whatever reason, same way that we back up mailboxes. You never know when you're going to need it in the future. So that same type of consideration is certainly going to become more applicable as the adoption rate for OneDrive for Business increases. So what you'll have here is the ability to go out and archive if you choose. So I can connect, as a global administrator in Office 365, I can connect to and access any of my users' OneDrive for Business locations, sites, inside of my tenant. And with the ability to connect to them and access them, I can also have the ability to back them up, or in this case, archive them. So I can do that very simply within the backup solution. You can archive it to local locations. You can archive it to a cloud storage. If you have Azure or S3, we support that as well. Or you can back it up to another person's OneDrive. So with all that great space that Microsoft's providing now, 1 terabyte, it certainly provides a nice solution to store content to those, and a lot of content. But the idea here is that you're going to go through and you're going to archive or back up someone's OneDrive. So you very simply choose to archive it locally, have that content in-house once the person leaves. And then you can do that for not only the content, but you can also do that with the security, the metadata, the version history. All of this stuff can be archived out through SharePoint or through OneDrive, and it'll allow you to keep that data in control so that once Microsoft comes through and deletes it all, you still have that data in-house and intact. Okay. This product also, of course, is automated as well, so I can come through and I can script it, and I can also schedule it. So more for the backup and restore procedure, you would want to automate the product, which we'll talk about just in a moment. But for here, you're probably going to want to archive it at least. So as part of your process, when an employee leaves the company, this could certainly be integrated very nicely, where as you're forwarding their mailbox, as you're archiving their mailbox, you're also going to run this operation to archive their OneDrive for Business. Okay, and as it's archived out, which we'll talk about just in a moment with the backup process, all the content is stored normalized, so you'll still have access to it. It's not going to be proprietary to Medves. Your content is your content, so it'll be stored as it is, accessible through Medves or accessible outside of Medves. So you'll be able to do with it what you want, whatever you need to do with it at any time in the future. Okay. You could also want to transfer it back to another user, so just like we transfer permissions from user A to user B, perhaps you want to transfer the content of user A's OneDrive over to user B. User B can be the new employee or potentially the manager of that employee. So you'll also have the capability, if you choose to use it, to restore the content or transfer the content to another user's OneDrive. So it doesn't just have to stay outside of OneDrive. You can also archive it and then ultimately restore it into another user's OneDrive, whomever needs access to it. Okay. And you can do that very simply. You just load in the content you have, select whatever you want. Maybe you want all of it, or maybe you just want some of it. I can come through and select any number of files or folders, and I can go to any other person's OneDrive as a global administrator, and I can restore the content back to there. It allows me to authenticate, but once you do, it'll allow you to restore content into another user's OneDrive. So great for transferring or moving content between OneDrives as well. Okay. Good time there to take a break. Peter, is there any questions about what we've covered thus far, or should we just continue?
Yeah, just can you hear me? Yeah, so just a couple questions. One was about the orphaned users report. So
Sure.
just the question is can the tool find orphaned users? And the answer is yes. And then you can also take action on those orphaned users, which is a good cleanup step, especially if you're in SharePoint to take a look and see what you have, at least archive those. The other option, the other question that is a good one is, as an admin, do I need to add my account first as a secondary owner of a user's my site, or can I do that before I can do a backup? So I think I answered the question as a OneDrive. Actually, maybe we can get some clarification for my site, but I believe admins have read permissions, which is all they need in order to do a backup. Is that correct? Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
In its current state, the way Microsoft works is for global admins, yeah, you can have read access as a global admin to any OneDrive. If you want to write to it, restore to it, or migrate into it, then it requires additional permissions, but the tool handles that automatically for you.
Okay. And then one of the last questions, if you transfer permissions, does it change the last modified value? And I answered no.
Okay. Yes. Correct.
Right. Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm 3 for 3. I'll leave it at that. So. Okay, yeah, so those are good questions. If anybody else has any questions, just put them in there and we'll take a break and try to answer them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And while you were switching there, I did mention it, I failed to show it, but we do have the option built right in here to the ribbon of Security Manager where you can locate orphan users. Orphan user, for those who are unfamiliar, is, in our terminology, is either a deleted account or a disabled account from whatever authentication product you're using, Active Directory or Federation in the cloud. So this will allow you to see those users, where they exist, and then, as Peter mentioned, take action. Action would be either to remove the permissions or to transfer them to someone who is obviously not orphaned. Okay, so let me switch back to backup here, talk about some of the things that the backup tool offers. Another part of administration, obviously, like I mentioned in the beginning, for on-premise folks, the idea of backup is common. It's accepted. It's done on a scheduled basis. I'm sure everybody has DR policies, maybe some more strict than others, but for on-premise folks, backup is usually in place already, whether you're doing SQL backups or snapshots, whatever you guys are using. For SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business, a lot of times people say, well, Microsoft does it for me, so I don't really need to back it up, which is true. Every day, twice a day, 14 days, they store all your backups. You call them, you wait X amount of time, however long it takes, and they restore it back for you. Their restore is more of a disaster recovery-based approach. They're going to restore everything. There's no granularity, there's no selectivity. You tell them the site collection, and they're all going to go and put it back for you. Okay. Think of it, some people think of it more as redundancy, as a backup, but it's certainly there in place. It's certainly part of your software agreement license, and it is available. Okay. So a lot of the questions we get is, well, why do I need to also back up my stuff if I'm in the cloud already? And the reason is because some people, one, are hesitant to have all of their eggs in the Microsoft basket. It makes people nervous, especially, again, in highly regulated environments where they need that extra peace of mind, that extra assurance that their content is safe, is secure, is accessible. If the cloud goes down, if the network goes down, they still need to be able to get to that content. So you'll have that type of extra peace of mind where that data is in the cloud, but it's also available outside of the cloud. Okay. You also have the selectivity. So I don't want to restore everything. If a user comes to me and says my file's corrupt, my list is gone, I overwrote this file, or I deleted it 7 months ago and I really need it back because I have a presentation to give. If you're relying solely on Microsoft in Office 365, you're in trouble. Recycle bin has already emptied itself, 30 days, 90 days. Your backups are gone, 14 days, so you really have no backup plan for that situation. So it gives you that type of long-term storage. Okay. It also gives you the ability to control the long-term storage. How frequently do you want to do it? Once a day, once a week? Do you want to do fulls, incremental? So it gives you a lot of functionality, a lot of extra control over your content, even though Microsoft's there in the back end to provide for the disaster side. Okay, and of course this all applies also to on-premise folks. You're doing SQL backups, which is great. You probably don't want to go back to that tape, which is stored somewhere off-site, if a user just needs a file back or a list back. It's a lot of work just to restore a single file, going through all of those hoops where you have your tape backups and whatnot. So this gives you a quick way to restore on a very granular level or on a higher level sites and lists if you need to do that. Okay. And like we mentioned just a moment ago, there's local storage, local to Medves, file shares. A lot of people who are moving from file shares into OneDrive for Business, as they decommission all those file servers, they become a great opportunity to use as backup locations. So you can back it up locally to your file shares. Cloud storage, again, is Azure or S3. If you have either of those and you want to store it in your own cloud, you can. Or also, obviously, Microsoft now 1 terabyte of OneDrives becomes a great location to store a lot of data and a lot of backup data. But the idea is very simple here. Again, you control where you want to store them. You control how often you want to back them up. And you also get to decide what you want to back up. So you can start at your sites, your OneDrives, include everything beneath it. Permissions. Another place we talk a lot of folks about is security backup. Content you have under control, where you want to rely on Microsoft. Security. Security is very easy to disrupt. You can accidentally reestablish permissions on a custom permissioned site or list. You could delete someone by mistake. There's no recycle bin there for security. So what this provides is the ability to also include all of your security. So this will be site permissions, list permissions, item permissions, SharePoint groups, group membership. So if you delete a SharePoint group by mistake, or you modify the membership of that group by mistake, this gives you the functionality to put it all back from whenever you did the backup. It doesn't have to be the last one. It could be one from 3 months ago. So it works great for site list or item backup for security and, of course, restore. Very selective. List views, content versions, all pretty self-explanatory, and the metadata. So we also will back up and restore metadata for you as well. Delete from source, mix in an archive, so that'll go through and delete it. You can do some filtering, and of course you can send a notification to yourself or site owners or site admins once the backup process has finished. So you can bring some notification to the automated process. And retention as well. Obviously you don't want to store backups forever, so you have the ability to come through and apply retention if you choose, so the tool can delete some of those older backups. Okay, and of course the scheduling component's built in, so you can set up how often you want that to back up. So once you start your backups, of course, you'll have snapshots, so it gives you a nice visual representation of all your prior backups within inside of your timeline. So at any given time, if I need to restore, I just have to simply go to that location, the date of which I did the backup. You have it very clearly labeled here with the timestamp as well as the type, full differentials or incrementals. And of course, I can also visualize if I'm not sure what I need to back up from. Any one of these can be exposed. I can see everything that was contained right down to the item level, and then I can decide what I need to restore at that point. And this can all be done on a very granular level, on the item, on the list, or of course on the site. And that'll give you the ability to put it back from whatever backup you want to its original location based off the options you want. So if I need to restore this list, but I don't want to restore the content, content's fine, content's already there, I just want to restore the security, I have the ability to do that very simply, put back to security on this library back from February 22nd. So it gives you a lot of control over your content, your security, your configurations, your setup, and it gives you all the ability to control that, both on the backup side and of course on the restore side as well. Okay. Also works obviously on the OneDrive, which we talked about just a moment ago, but you will have the ability to back up a single OneDrive or all of your OneDrive for Business sites if you want to offer that as a peace of mind for your end users. Okay, so that'll give you a couple of ways there if you need to, again, on-premise or online. It does provide some valuable assurance that your data will remain intact and that it will be accessible if you need to access it for restore purposes or for collaboration. Okay, so other part when it comes to administration that we talk to folks about when it comes to content is analytics. So it's a good idea if you're looking to set up your backup schedules and need to find out which sites do I need to back up, which sites are being used, which sites are not being used. If you're doing a migration project and I have a whole bunch of sites or collections, it might be a good idea to find out which ones are used and not, so I can set up my migration plan or my backup plan. Or if I need to see who's using their OneDrives and who's not using their OneDrives. That type of information, that type of usage or analytics is what you can generate through the tool. So within side natively of 365, talking specifically here, there are some reports built in. They're kind of rudimentary at this stage. It's just going to show you how many sites for OneDrive are deployed, how much data is being consumed by them. The Exchange side has more around mail and DLP, things like that. But when it comes to OneDrive for Business, when it comes to SharePoint Online, the reporting is a little basic today. I'm sure they'll improve it in the future, but you do have some basic reporting which will give you that type of high-level analytics. What we're looking at here with the MetaVis tool is that when we go out and we collect data, again, this process is also automated, so it's going to go out and it's going to, on a scheduled basis, collect a bunch of information from your SharePoint sites on-premise, SharePoint sites online, or your OneDrive for Businesses. We do fully support that as well. It goes out on a scheduled basis, collects a whole bunch of information from those different locations, and then it generates dashboards and reports so that you can get some more specific information, not just how many sites are there, how many OneDrives are there, how much data they're consuming, but let's learn more about it. What types of files are they storing? Security, who's sharing what with whom? Very important to find out, especially on the OneDrive for Business side and the SharePoint side. Is data leaving your company? So you'll have a whole bunch of the information that's gathered through the collection process and then visually represented through these different reports you see here. So you have basic things like your consumption, so you can see trending information. This will help you predict growth trends, so where you want to increase your quota, decrease your quota. You'll see where content's being stored throughout your sites. If you have an interest in seeing the views, how many people are visiting your sites, viewing your sites, you can see trending information, most viewed sites. Gives you a way to visualize not just people going there to work with the content, but they're going to these sites, just visiting the sites, maybe consuming what's there. Gives you a good way to visualize some of that information. And if you're dealing with the OneDrive, let me switch over to the OneDrive side. You have dashboards that will show you similar type of information across all of your drives, including the largest consumers of space. Everybody has a terabyte now. Let's see who's actually consuming, how much of that terabyte. Types of files they're storing, who they're sharing. We'll talk about that more in just a minute, but we also are looking at the security here as well to see if data's leaving your organization, being shared externally or internally. So you have ways to visualize that as well. When it gets into the content itself, you have a number of reports that go further into it. So you can have analytics about the types of files, who's storing their MP3 files, who's storing large zip files, AVI files, is it Office documents, is it PDFs? It tells you the breakdown of all the different files that are stored by size or by count, and these reports are also interactive. So I can select any portion of these reports, and it's going to show me the exact breakdown. So who's storing? If you have 100 gigs of MP3 files, let's see who's storing it. How many OneDrives are storing those type of files, or by count as well. On the SharePoint side, you can have things like content distribution, also OneDrive as well, so you can see version history. This is a large consumer of quota. A lot of people fail to realize or don't know, and maybe more so just don't know how much of that quota is being consumed by your version history. So if you have a lot of it being consumed, 50% or more is consumed by your version history, maybe it's a good idea, instead of increasing the quota over and over, we'll just implement version limitations. So keep that growth under control when it comes to your histories. And then of course you can also just have simple hierarchy reports, which we'll go through. This is the OneDrive, so it'll show me all the drives, amount of items people store, the sizes that they have, and the views, of course. So views is great because it shows you interest. Are people just storing content in their OneDrive, or are they actually going there and using it? So I can see Peter, obviously, for 4,500 views, so he's actively going to his OneDrive. So he's actually working with it. He's uploading files. He's working with content. He's probably sharing it, which we'll see in a minute. So he has a lot of activity there. So it's an active OneDrive for Business site, not just someone who's using it to store a bunch of files. Okay, you can also get into more of the activity. We talked about the views, but you also have content activity reports showing you where content's being created or modified most frequently or least frequently, content type usage, more so on the SharePoint side, and user activity. Number of settings, some of these more specific to SharePoint, where we're getting into version settings, which libraries have versioning turned on or turned off, content approval, inheritance, all of those can be visualized. And just like in Security Manager, you have a whole menu here in the context, which will give you the ability to take number of actions, real-time actions, like changing list settings or working with security, running real-time security reports, certainly a nice built-in here, as well as just doing inventory reports. Talked about permissions over in security, permission inventory. This will give you content inventory. So if you just need to see a list of the content that's being stored in a site or a list or a person's OneDrive, this will give you the ability to quickly export out a file that contains all the different listing of the data that they're storing, as well as metadata if you choose. So nice things there. Shared with, mentioned it a few times here. This is great for those folks who have turned on external sharing in Office 365, on-premise folks who already have it set up. This will let you know that yes, people are sharing internally, and yes, people are sharing externally. So you can see all the domains they're sharing with outside of your organization. It'll show you exactly which person's OneDrive has that sharing enabled, which email account that person has access to that person's OneDrive. And if you want to know exactly which content within that person's OneDrive that person has access to and the level of permission they have to those objects, that's where you have your security analysis. So I can select any user, any specific user from here, and I can run a report that'll show me exactly which files, which folders, which locations that user has access to, internal user or external user, and the level of access they have to each of those objects. So this will all be done in real time so that, again, we want to make sure that the reports that we give you when it comes to security are the absolute most up-to-date they possibly could be. So you can really get very, very granular when it comes to security and very specific so that you can find out exactly what people are doing. Okay, and then we also came through here and we just recently added these correlation reports. This is the first one of many to come, where we're simply comparing 2 or more data points against each other. So it gives you a nice interpretation of data growth, version growth, quota will be the next one that comes out, so you can see the ratio between the quota of your sites versus the actual consumption of your sites. And you'll have a number of these different reports here, which you can then come through and compare multiple data points. Right. So in addition to all of this, of course, just like, again, like security, all of this information can be exported out of the tool. Export to a PDF if you want to share it with your colleagues or your management. PDF will give you the combination of the visuals as well as the analytical information. And you can also export to Excel. Excel will allow you to include the trending information. So if you have your own BI tool, Power BI if you're in 365, or you just want to use Excel charting and pivot charts, this will export all of the information we've collected through the process and give you a nice clean Excel report that you can generate your own visuals from. So you'll have flexibility there. And of course you can save these out. And we'll provide automation for this as well, so you can do it on a scheduled basis in the near future. All right, so good way to be able to visualize when it comes to usage and activity, consumption, things along those lines. Great for administrative purposes. And then the final thing I'll talk about here just for just a few moments, and then I want to leave about 5 or so minutes for questions if there are any, is the final portion that I mentioned earlier on about the makeup, the structure of your content. Does it contain secure information? Does it contain PII? Not typically the role of administrators in the past, but as the ease of use for SharePoint Online, especially OneDrive for Business, increases and people start storing more and more information in there, it will eventually become the concern of the administrators to make sure that people are not storing things they shouldn't be storing.
Hey, Chris, can I interrupt real quick with just a couple questions?
Sure.
Oh, okay. So, you know, there's some questions about. They also want to discuss moving content around. I mean, you may have touched upon that, but if you can go into just a quick overview. I mean, obviously, our migration platform can do pretty much anything as far as content. But the question is can we manage features activated report on the site? So you may want to touch upon the pre-migration analysis report, which can be used not just for pre-migration, but pretty much for anything. It's a good analysis report to see what you have. And so touch upon that, because I know we're running out of little time, and maybe we got to have a a separate session about some of the more detailed stuff.
Okay, sure.
But I'll let you continue. Thanks. Bye.
Sure. Sure. Thank you. So yeah, there's 2 questions that were asked there, or maybe there was more than 2. But one, the movement of content, the reorganization of data, migration, however we want to classify it. Absolutely support it. Outside of the scope of what we wanted to talk about today, just because although it is an administrative task, it's really its own separate entity. But we do fully support migration between SharePoints, between clouds, on-premise to online, online to on-premise, multiple different sources, file shares, and whatnot. So if you need to move content around, you need to reorganize, you need to reclassify, add new metadata, change metadata, things like that, absolutely support it. Very easy to do through the migration tool, also available on the platform, and also agentless solution. The other question about features, analysis, things like that, We do support that type of stuff over here in the pre-migration analysis. As Peter mentioned, it's not just for migration purposes, but it was designed to give that type of information to better facilitate the success of a migration. So this type of report, which can be run outside of migration, of course, gives you the ability to go through and scan SharePoints, SharePoint sites, on-premise or online, any version of SharePoint, 2007, 2010, 2013. And you're looking for characteristics. So the one specific question was about features. This is going to go through and analyze which features are active in that environment that you're looking at. So you can see every site collection feature, every site level feature that's turned on, and you can also see if it's a custom feature or an out-of-the-box feature. So it goes through, it scans it, it also exports it out to an Excel file. So you'll have the ability to view it through Excel, of course, and also to do all the fun stuff that Excel has, sorting, filtering, all that good stuff. So it goes through, it gives you a whole bunch of different reports. One is templates, it gives you condition codes. Condition codes are purely for migration purposes, so you can see the level of severity that this particular object might have when it comes to migrating it to your destination. But it'll also tell you the templates that were used, whether they be out-of-the-box templates, custom templates, Fabulous 40 for you folks who are still using 2007. You might have some of those Fab 40 templates in use. Features, this is the question that was specifically asked. This looks at all the features that are active in your source, and it'll tell you in green, out of the box, red or pinkish color is not out of the box. So it could be a custom solution or it could be a third-party solution, but it's not a part of an out-of-the-box SharePoint deployment. Okay, a number of other sections, I'll just breeze through these really quick since we're here. We also look at custom web parts, which again could also be for administrative purposes. Let's see which web parts people are using and if they are using them. And if they are, where are they using them? So we'll look at every page in that environment. We'll look at every web part that's on those pages. And we'll let you know, again, green is out of the box, list view web parts, content queries, things like that. And the ones highlighted in red are those custom ones or third-party solutions or web parts, excuse me. So good for discovery here. Again, usage of your SharePoint, who's using it, how they're using it. Amount of content per list, raw number of items, the total size. Also can get this through the administration reports. Workflows. Do you have any workflows? If so, which lists, which sites have workflows associated to them? If you're on-premise and you're using Mintex, are you actually using it? Where are you using it? So it gives you that type of information as well. Site-level workflows, if you have any of them. And then also content. Content gives you sizes, checked out status, if it's currently checked out or not. Again, more specific to migration, but certainly applicable to the administrative side as well. So a lot of this stuff is available, of course, in the platform when we're dealing with the migration, but obviously usable outside of that space as well. Okay. Was that all the questions, Peter, about those type of reports or analysis? Guess I could look myself too.
Yeah. So no, I think that covered it off, and certainly we can go into more detail. So people had some questions about pricing. So our pricing, we have various different options from a pricing perspective. Some of our products are sold by the number of users. Like for example, the OneDrive. There's a it's based upon the OneDrive management suite is based upon the number of users, and it starts as like a minimum of $500 for like 50 users, but then the price drops off pretty rapidly as the number of users increase, and that's it basically counts by the number of OneDrive. Other products are sold by the amount of content under management. So our pricing, really, you got to get a salesperson involved because there's all kinds of different options where you can charge by amount of content, or you can pick different parts of the suite and other thing, and they can help you get into the the right setup. So that's all on that, and best to reach out to sales@metavistech.com and get some information there. And if anybody has any feedback as far as the anything else they want to learn in the future webinars about OneDrive or Office 365 or SharePoint on-premise, we're happy to discuss those things and also bring in some experts from the outside So we're always looking for suggestions from our customer base and about what they want to learn about, and we can try to incorporate that into our webinar series. I also recommend that you take a look at our webinars that are archived on our website. There's tons of great stuff in that catalog from previous presenters who have talked about security and content types and branding and all kinds of different options out there in SharePoint. So that's a great resource. It's free, and you can access that information on demand and watch it during lunch. And it's a good way to get an education from some of the experts out there. But Chris, thanks again for presenting. And if there's nothing else, we'll let everybody go on time, and hopefully we'll see you at the next webinar.
Okay, thanks everyone.
All right, take care. Bye.